Hello, good evening. My name is Frederick Brown, and this is my project on the geological history of Iceland. Here we go. It's like a little stuck there. So, as far as Iceland's geology goes, Iceland is one of our largest countries on the ridge because of its additional volcanism caused by the hotspot under the country. So during the formation of Iceland, from the hotspot that was assumed label as the Iceland plume, which was believed to be the first formed Iceland piece that was broken off of Greenland due to I believe it was um, due to C4 spreading. Due to that C4 spreading, that is what we know today as Iceland, that little island that kind of drifted off southeast a couple miles away. And during that formation, it is believed to be that Iceland was to be appeared about 16 to 18 million years ago when that had happened. Now, the unique circumstances of that ridge are probably the reason for its country's existence because the tectonic movement of the plates forming around the Earth's surface was very much related to the volcanism that would have not sufficed. So basically, what it's saying is that the tectonic movement of the plates through the Earth's surface, um, in relation to that, would not really have caused much volcanic activity happening at Iceland during the early stages that it had formed. Now, when Iceland was formed around in the mid, I'll move myself up here. Iceland was formed around the volcanic eruptions during the mid-Atlantic ridge. It wouldn't take about 24 million years ago until Iceland was the only place you can stand on dry land, which made it a very special place when geologists went to do their research done from the very past events that would happen in Iceland, going back all the way to the foundings of the Vikings. But we'll be getting into that in a little bit. All right. As far as Iceland's mineral composition is concerned, it's considered of 90% of basalt. That is this rock here that I have on display. Kind of have as a little presentation. Um, so let's talk about this rock basalt at first. It is an dark rock that's usually found in the solidification of magma, and being around a hotspot that Iceland is, with a bunch of magmatic materials going beneath under the surface bed. Most of these materials would make up most of the minerals they would use on to this day. It was a very dense and fine grained material, and usually it consists of very different types of materials such as augite and magnesite. Iceland spar is a very other material that isn't like a pure calcite crystal that is performed on Iceland. And even though that it can be found in other places, it usually under the microscope you can tell the distinct difference of the ones that come from Iceland compared to the different places that you would probably perhaps see it at. These little optical instruments has a double refractive property over the stone, which studies have shows that it has a really good refraction of light as to go along with it, as it has been studied by very famous and new world scientists such as Isaac Newton, George Stokes, and William Nicol. Not to mention rocks and minerals that are formed in Iceland have been taken due to Iceland. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, kind of went off topic there. I was actually going to mention a fun fact that the rocks and minerals that are found in Iceland, there are privately owned land, so you would actually not be able to take them as a souvenir. Oh darn! Unfortunately, due to basically just the formation of Iceland and how it came to about, that we'll get onto later. Very much of it being a privately owned company due to its past king really just didn't enable everyone to do as they please. So they restricted some laws to go along with that enabled them to not be able to take any of the materials. So when all of these Iceland materials were analyzed and formed by researchers, they were done in Iceland. They were, you would never see pretty much any other Icelandic mineral composition accurately described in another place due to its ability for them to not let any of those materials reach them get out of their mainland. So most of the research was done there. Although they have not let any of the materials be taken out of Iceland, they have enabled the public to participate in souvenirs that they actually made from the lava rocks that would come from previous volcanic eruptions that they would then give out instead of people being able to get into those minerals. But going back into a little bit more of the mineral composition that Iceland has to offer, aluminum is also a very good leading factor in commodity in Iceland as of today, as it is their most produced material, and it is one of the 25 indigenous rocks that is found in Iceland. So, along to with this formation of the crystals and everything like that, found from these rocks that people mined, this was pretty much their main den setter for being able to produce most of their materials and to very much distinctly classify each of the different rocks and minerals that was taken from Iceland that day. Right. Going on to the specific Iceland time period, starting from all the way back into the ninth century, there was a Viking named Nador. And now Nador was the one who discovered Iceland. And when he went back to his boat, he saw the snow that was happening to leave him as he was off the shore. So the first traveler decided to name the land Snowland. Iceland would eventually get its name eventually, but after Nador, pretty much did some scavenging and exploring with it with the other few explorers that traveled right after him, such as the names as Savarsson and Hafranfiki. We have later found a settlement that would eventually go into place that would go into Iceland. Now you fast forward from the 9th century all the way to the 18th century, and then this is where Iceland gets its first census. That means its first densely populated population is formed. So, with the recorded history of what we have in Iceland right now, it was from those Viking explorers all the way back into the 9th century that pretty much took a place, and then that people that were enslaved from the north then again went along and traveled, and even though that they were new to Iceland, there were very much parts of Iceland that was still uninhabited, along with the rest of the Western European that had settled there at that time. Now, as Iceland has developed its first population, a constitution was later brought into 1874 to when Denmark still had rule. So the King of Denmark still had very much influence during the early lands of Iceland at that time. And due to that, Iceland became part of Denmark. Like it shared its same government, same policies. So it was very much in its rise of nationalism at that time, where in the early 19th century, they wanted to go on into more of an independent union because as they developed more universal suffrage, that basically means like all rights for everybody being equal and for their political parties being established at that time, they decided they wanted to become a sovereign independence, and then they started a movement which emerged in Iceland. And once they gained that on sovereigns, they still were under the land of King. They were still under rule of the King of Denmark, but they were its own sovereign property at that time. So, becoming in the Kingdom of Iceland during December of 1918. However, Iceland is shared in the Danish monarchy until World War II. So basically, it had still much of its influence that had passed over from the First War into its sovereignty, but then it didn't really get total, like, its freedom reign until much later on that happened. Now, Iceland severed its remaining ties with Denmark following the Second War, so this is when they decided to be completely independent. And as it was founding its member in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it joined its United Nations established after 1 year. So then they were able to provide for themselves with the population that they had to be seen as an actual contending a landmark of government. Here we're going to be launching into a little bit more of the mechanisms that Iceland has to offer. So that's Iceland is on a type of tectonic plate boundary called a divergent plate boundary. Now this divergent plate boundary was called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge that ran through the center of Iceland and only occurred in two plates, which was the North American plate and the Eurasian plate that are usually just what pull away from each other. So that was pretty much the fracture from Greenland that was happening underneath the bedrock. because since the formation of Iceland was underneath that bedrock and the water was below its surface, when they would have earthquakes and everything like that, from before it kind of broke off into that fracture, and then when it carried it off into its ridge here, pretty much over time, it's pretty much has developed to be still that constant bubbling mass of magma that was underneath its surface due to the hot spot it came from. Now, with the magma flow that is in Iceland today, it has been analyzed by Darcy's law of flow in porous medron, which means that the molten magma reserves that are in the bedrock of Iceland are fed to the surface through the eruptions, and then they feed the magma chambers that are in Iceland's crust. Now, the geology of Iceland can be explained from these constraints due to that magma that is built into those crusts, as those stress barriers that are the contributions to those eruptions that occur in Iceland pretty much concludes that its histories of past eruptions that happened even in way back times many millions of years ago. And in conclusion, due to the history of those eruptions that were caused by those magma chambers underneath those rocks, the heat actually underneath the bedrock decided to actually undergo some elastic properties that went along into that. So the evolution of this island that pretty much that was created through all these volcanic eruptions, pretty much underneath the bedrock, getting cool and hot again, spreading out between the bedrock, really just shows what kind of happened when the island was created and how that molten lava kind of just shaped the formation of the land today while the ocean cooled it as well. Now, what is Iceland's current situation today? That is one big question that people have. And according to a 2015 study that was conducted by the University of Arizona in Iceland, Iceland's ocean is really much at an alarming rate of 1.4 inches per year due to its regional district of climate change. And it wasn't pretty much not too long ago, I'd say about 12 years ago, just about 12 years ago, that it's only pretty much major volcanic eruption happened due to the extreme weather of this volcano, unfortunately, that I cannot pronounce. But pretty much seeing that glacial melting is an economy, this pretty much weighed heavy on what the history and kind of mindset of Iceland kind of went to establish on itself. And it weighed heavy on the country's growing tourism and industry, even though that the reason that they were able to establish that in the first place was because that they had very many mining rights. So once they had their mining down and they were able to distribute to other factors, they built their wealth onto that. But the same thing that brought the country together is kind of the reason why the country is in peril right now. So it's a bit of irony mixed in there. A bit of irony mixed in there. All right, and this was my presentation. Thank you so much for watching, and I am glad you all enjoyed.